You know your HOA has lost its mind when you wake up one morning and find your own ranch fenced off and you're standing outside like a stray dog begging to get in. Oh, it gets better. The only key to that shiny new gate, held proudly by Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, who decided my family's 80-acre ranch was now common area under revised neighborhood guidelines. I hope she enjoyed that brief reign, because what happened next? Well, let's just say there's a reason you don't pick fights with a man who can buy your entire playground. It all started innocently enough, at least. That's what Karen and her minions would have you believe. About 6 months ago, the HOA board, freshly stacked with Karen's best friends after a suspiciously convenient election, decided they needed to beautify the community. Safety concerns. They said, we must maintain neighborhood standards. They said, never mind that my ranch sat half a mile beyond the nearest HOA property line. Never mind that it had been in my family for 3 generations long before the first cookie-cutter house popped up across the old highway. Karen and her HOA cronies slapped a few new rules into the handbook, rules that magically extended the HOA's aesthetic jurisdiction to include adjacent undeveloped properties. And just like that, my ranch, which they neither owned nor managed, became their new pet project. One Tuesday morning, I found contractors installing a gleaming 6-foot-tall wrought iron fence along my property's front entrance. They even had the nerve to install a keypad entry gate and hand-delivered me a letter stating that access to my own land now required a community-approved permit available for the modest sum of $500 per year. You can bet your bottom dollar, Karen stood by sipping her pumpkin spice latte, smirking like the cat who ate the canary. She thought she had me. She thought I would roll over, pay her access fee, and fall in line like every other poor soul in the subdivision. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the tiny, scraggly 20 by 30-foot parcel of land they used to install the gate, yeah, it didn't belong to the HOA. It belonged to Old Man Harris. And guess who just happened to be his favorite nephew? And as of last week, the brand new legal owner of the only piece of land that controlled access to both my ranch and their entire newly fenced community entrance. That's right, me and Karen. She was about to learn a very expensive lesson about property rights, chain of title, and why you don't mess with the wrong rancher. Stay tuned, because trust me, this is where it gets real good. The day after I signed the deed for that little sliver of land, I put on my best Sunday boots, grabbed my trusty set of keys, and headed down to the new gate Karen had so graciously installed. Funny thing about legal ownership, once the ink's dry, it doesn't matter how many rules the HOA writes in their little booklets. It doesn't matter how many angry group emails Karen blasts out to concerned neighbors. Ownership is ownership, period, full stop. And according to the county records, I now own the 20 by 30-foot patch of dirt directly under that shiny new gate. When I arrived, Karen was already there in full battle armor, clipboard sweater set, that ever-present smug expression glued to her face like it had been stapled there in the 80s. I gave her a polite nod. She didn't nod back. Instead, she raised her eyebrows as if to say, "What do you think you're doing here, peasant?" I didn't say a word. I just walked right up to the gate, pulled out my new set of keys, and unlocked it. The satisfying click echoed like a gunshot across the cul-de-sac. Karen gasped audibly as the gate swung open under my hand. Behind her, a few of the other HOA board members peered out from behind their minivans, jaws hanging open. "Oh, no, no, no," Karen said, marching up to me, heels clicking against the pavement. "This is HOA property. You can't just—" I pulled a folded document out of my back pocket. Nothing fancy, just a certified copy of the deed fresh from the county recorder's office. "I believe you'll find," I said in my best polite cowboy voice, "that this little patch of ground and the gate you so thoughtfully paid for belong to me now." Karen snatched the paper out of my hands, scanning it furiously. Her face went pale. You can't do this," she sputtered. I smiled. "Already did." Within minutes, the rest of the HOA board was gathered around, forming a tight little circle of pastel cardigans and khaki shorts. They tried everything's threats. "We'll sue you," begging, "let's be reasonable." Bribes. "We'll offer you $5,000 to sell the land to the HOA. I listened politely to all of it, nodding, smiling, pretending to consider, and then declined every offer. "See," I said, "I'm not interested in money. I'm interested in using my ranch, which means starting today, nobody gets through this gate unless I say so." Karen looked like she was about to faint. Some of the board members started whispering among themselves, already blaming each other for the disaster. Meanwhile, I installed a brand new padlock on the gate, my padlock, and posted a shiny new sign right next to the keypad. Private property trespassers will be prosecuted. And just to make things absolutely clear, I also called the county sheriff's department to let them know about the change in ownership. Deputies were more than happy to swing by and explain to the HOA in small, easy-to-understand words that they now needed my permission to use the access road. I don't think Karen slept that night. Over the next few days, things went from bad to worse for the HOA. Turns out blocking access to my ranch hadn't just inconvenienced me. They had also used the same entrance to access a popular hiking trail, a small community garden, and oh, the irony, their own scenic lookout point that they'd been bragging about on the HOA website. With the gate locked, none of those amenities were accessible anymore. Parents were furious, hikers were furious, gardeners were livid, and every single angry phone call, every complaint, every lawsuit threat, it all landed squarely in Karen's lap. You'd think at this point Karen would throw in the towel, apologize, make nice, maybe even offer a real settlement. You'd be wrong. Instead, Karen doubled down. She filed an official complaint with the HOA's law firm, accusing me of unneighborly conduct and deliberate obstruction of community assets. That's right. After fencing off my own ranch and locking me out, Karen had the gall to accuse me of being the bad neighbor. Their attorney sent me a cease and desist letter, a real beauty, full of scary words and dire threats. I framed it and hung it in my study. Then I called my own lawyer, a specialist in property law who laughed so hard he had to put the phone down. Turns out the HOA had absolutely zero legal standing to challenge my ownership of the gateland. Their own community bylaws didn't even mention adjacent properties because, surprise, surprise, they didn't own any. Karen's bluff had finally been called, and she didn't have a winning hand. 2 weeks later, we had a formal hearing. I showed up with my lawyer, copies of all deeds and plats, and a 40-slide PowerPoint presentation titled, "Why You Shouldn't Build on Land You Don't Own." Karen showed up with her clipboard, her attitude, and about 6 board members who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. After 2 hours of getting absolutely shredded by my lawyer and a warning from the county mediator that they could be facing civil damages if they kept harassing me, Karen finally cracked. She offered me $50,000 to buy back the gateland. I declined. I told her I'd be happy to rent them access to their own community entrance for $1,500 a month, plus utilities. The look on her face worth every penny I had spent. You'd think after losing the gate, getting humiliated at the hearing, and being forced to rent access to her own precious community entrance, Karen would finally back off. Most people would have licked their wounds, blamed the board, and quietly resigned. But Karen was built different. Instead of accepting defeat, she went full scorched earth. It started small. Petty, really. Suddenly, I started getting daily violation notices from the HOA. My grass-red native prairie grass was too tall. My barn, a perfectly legal structure, was not in compliance with aesthetic standards. My mailbox, which had been there since 1965, was not an approved model. Each notice came with a fine attached, $50, $100, $200. It was almost impressive how creative they got. But it was also stupid because none of it applied to me. See, my ranch was never legally incorporated into the HOA. I wasn't under their authority, never signed their covenants, never agreed to their rules. They could send me all the angry letters they wanted. They had no teeth. Still, it was annoying, and Karen was clearly hoping I'd get tired, make a mistake, or better yet, retaliate in a way she could actually sue over spoiler. I didn't. Instead, I documented everything, every letter, every bogus fine, every passive-aggressive email, all neatly organized in a growing folder titled Karen's Greatest Hits. 2 months into Karen's campaign of harassment, I got an official notice. The HOA had scheduled an emergency board meeting topic, addressing hostile property owner behavior. Guess who the hostile property owner was? Hint, you're listening to him? The meeting was supposed to be for board members only, but through the magic of small-town gossip, I found out the date and time, so I showed up not alone either. I brought my lawyer, a county official from the zoning department who owed me a favor, and a local news reporter who loved a good HOA meltdown story. Karen's face when I walked into the clubhouse, absolutely priceless. The meeting quickly turned into a train wreck. Karen tried to present her case that I was disturbing community harmony, that my ranch was negatively impacting property values, that I was a danger to the neighborhood. My lawyer calmly shredded every point. The zoning official confirmed publicly that my property was not and never had been subject to HOA jurisdiction. The reporter, bless her heart, took notes furiously the whole time. Karen kept getting more and more shrill until finally, in front of 24 witnesses, she snapped, "I don't care what the county says. This is our community and we'll make the rules." There it was, the soundbite of the century. The reporter didn't even bother hiding her grin. Karen had just publicly admitted she didn't care about legal boundaries, only power. It was over within a week. Half the HOA board resigned. Karen was removed as president, and the county issued a formal warning to the HOA about unlawful harassment and misuse of authority. For the first time in months, peace settled over the neighborhood. No more violation notices, no more fines, no more late-night angry emails. The gate remained under my control. The rental agreement stood firm. And Karen? She quietly put her house up for sale. Rumor has it she moved 2 towns over to a subdivision without an HOA. I can only imagine her terror living somewhere she couldn't boss people around. You thought that was the end, didn't you? So did I, until one rainy Thursday morning, I got a certified letter in the mail. Karen, in one last, desperate act, had filed a small claims lawsuit against me. Her claim: intentional infliction of emotional distress. That's right. Karen was suing me for hurting her feelings. The letter was so absurd, I actually laughed out loud. Even my dog looked at me funny. Still, lawsuits, even stupid ones, are no joke. So once again, I lawyered up. We showed up at the courthouse ready to fight. Karen was there too, naturally clutching a tissue like a martyr about to be led to the gallows. She gave an emotional testimony about how isolated and victimized she felt, how she could no longer enjoy her home knowing I was spitefully withholding access to community property. The judge listened politely, then turned to me. I calmly explained, "I legally purchased the gateland. I lawfully restricted access. I was harassed with unfounded violations for months. I never once engaged with Karen outside of formal proceedings, and then I presented the pièce de résistance, a thumb drive, full of every nasty email Karen had ever sent me, every fake fine notice, every voicemail where she screamed obscenities." The courtroom was silent as the judge scrolled through them. When he finally looked up, his face was stone cold. He dismissed Karen's lawsuit on the spot, and cherry on top, he ordered her to pay my legal fees. You'd think after losing in court publicly, spectacularly, Karen would finally take the hint and ride off into the sunset. Bless her heart, she just couldn't help herself. If she couldn't beat me in the courtroom, she tried to destroy me in the court of public opinion. It started with a letter. Well, not to me, mind you. This letter went straight to the county zoning and planning department. An anonymous concerned citizen accused me of running an unlicensed commercial enterprise out of my ranch, violating environmental protection ordinances, conducting illegal agricultural activities. Mind you, I raise cattle. Same as my granddaddy did, same as his daddy before him. Pretty sure the cows didn't know they needed a business license. The county, obligated to investigate every formal complaint, sent out an inspector. Nice kid, new on the job. Drove up in a little white Prius, clipboard in hand, trying to look intimidating in his shiny new badge. I invited him in, offered him coffee, and showed him around. No illegal operations, no environmental violations, no secret goat fighting ring in the barn. He took a bunch of pictures, filled out some forms, apologized for the inconvenience, and left case closed. Right, wrong. The media circus. 2 days later, the local news station ran a story. Ranch owner investigated for code violations. They didn't name me outright, but they didn't have to. The camera zoomed lovingly over my ranch entrance, the famous gate, the same one Karen had fought me over for months. The implication was clear. I was a lawbreaker, a menace to the community, a stain on the pristine suburban landscape. Gee, I wonder who tipped them off. Turns out Karen had been very busy. She wasn't just filing complaints. She was calling local politicians, dropping hints at Chamber of Commerce meetings, whispering in realtors' ears that my ranch was a problem property. Her goal was obvious: tank my reputation, decrease my property value, force me to sell and slink away in shame. What Karen didn't realize, or maybe what her ego wouldn't let her accept, was that I'm a stubborn old cuss. My family survived dust storms, droughts, 2 world wars, and 6 recessions, a couple bad headlines, and a PTA. Mom with a vendetta, please. This time I didn't just defend, I went on the offensive. First, I called up that nice young inspector and got a written statement clearing me of all violations. Then I filed a formal complaint with the county ethics board against Karen, citing harassment, abuse of process, and filing false reports. Turns out government agencies don't like being used as personal weapons, especially when the evidence trail emails, texts, social media posts all pointed straight back to Karen. She wasn't exactly subtle about it either. One of her Facebook posts, helpfully screenshotted by a neighbor, read, "Maybe if we all file complaints, the cowboy will get tired and leave." Bless her heart, the county scheduled a public ethics hearing, and boy did it draw a crowd, reporters, neighbors, even a few old ranchers who smelled blood in the water. Karen showed up looking like she was headed to church. Pearl's navy dress, smile glued to her face. She even brought a folder full of evidence, mostly grainy cell phone photos of cows and fence posts. Meanwhile, I brought the inspector's clearing report, my property deeds, screenshots of Karen's social media posts, and a stack of notarized statements from neighbors sick of her antics. The ethics board took one look at the mountain of evidence and adjourned for 20 minutes. When they came back, the verdict was swift and brutal. Karen was officially censured for abuse of process, fined $10,000 for wasting public resources, barred from filing further complaints without direct board approval, and the cherry on top, the local newspaper ran a front-page story the next day. HOA president fined for false complaints against ranch owner. Karen's face was right there, full color, under the headline. I clipped a copy, framed it, and hung it next to the cease and desist letter she once sent me. It's my little wall of trophies. In the weeks that followed, Karen resigned from every civic board she'd ever joined. Her house sat on the market for months, no buyers willing to touch the drama. Eventually, she packed up and moved 2 states away. Rumor has it to a gated community where the HOA rules are so strict, you can't even have lawn gnomes. Poetic justice, if you ask me. As for me, well, life's been good. The ranch is thriving. The gate is still standing tall. The cows are fat and happy. And every morning when I drive past that shiny iron entrance, I tip my hat, not in respect, but in remembrance, to Karen, the woman who thought she could fence me out and ended up fencing herself out of her own life. When Karen finally packed up her 3-bedroom colonial, jammed it full of boxy furniture and questionable taste, and skipped town, the entire neighborhood threw a quiet, unofficial celebration. There were backyard barbecues, beer flowed like water. Someone even lit fireworks slightly illegal, but nobody was calling the cops. For the first time in months, there was peace, or so we thought, because just like a tornado that rips the roof off your house and leaves a family of raccoons behind, Karen didn't leave quietly. She left a ticking time bomb. About a month after Karen left it, a certified letter showed up at my door. Another one. I sighed, figuring it was just another desperate attempt from some HOA straggler still loyal to Queen Karen. But this one was different. This was a class action lawsuit, filed not just against me, but against every single property owner in the subdivision, including myself. The claim, apparently the Homeowners Association had suffered catastrophic financial losses and emotional distress due to the unauthorized and unlawful obstruction of communal property by the defendant. Translation: Karen had filed a lawsuit on behalf of the entire HOA before she left office, claiming millions of dollars in damages. And because she filed it as president while she still legally held the title, it was technically valid. Karen had pulled one final fast one. The neighborhood exploded. Phone calls, emails, panic, people who barely knew me, people who had sided with Karen just months ago, were now camped out on my porch begging for help. The HOA itself was in complete disarray. Half the board had resigned. The treasury was empty. Nobody knew who had the authority to withdraw the lawsuit. Meanwhile, the attorneys Karen hired, Sharkey, big city types, smelled blood in the water. They weren't backing down. They were demanding settlement money from each homeowner, some as high as $15,000 apiece, all based on Karen's manufactured damages. It was pure chaos, and everyone was looking at me like I held the magic solution. At first, I considered just fighting the lawsuit myself. I could afford the legal fees I knew I'd win, but then I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had thrown a grenade into the middle of my community. Good people, decent folks were about to lose their savings because one bitter woman couldn't stand losing. No way was I letting her win like that, so I hatched a plan. First, I called a town meeting. At the old church hall, the same place my granddaddy once rallied ranchers to fight a land grab, back in the 30s, old school style. When I stood up at the podium, the room was packed. Young families clutching toddlers, retired vets in baseball caps, ranchers with calloused hands and sunburned faces. I laid it all out, simple and straight. The lawsuit had no merit. Karen's claims were fabricated, but fighting individually would be expensive and risky. Then I made my proposal. If y'all are willing to stand together, if you trust me, I'll pay for the legal team. We'll file a counterclaim for harassment and malicious prosecution. We'll take this fight all the way if we have to. Silence. And then one by one, people stood up, nodding, clapping, cheering. Old man Parker even slapped me on the back so hard I almost lost my hat. We hired the best property rights lawyer in the state, a bulldog in a 10-gallon hat. Within a week, we filed a counterclaim demanding dismissal of Karen's lawsuit, reimbursement for legal fees and punitive damages for malicious prosecution. The tide turned almost immediately. Turns out those big city attorneys Karen hired didn't actually want a real fight. They wanted easy settlement money. When they realized we had a real case, a very public, very embarrassing one, they scrambled. Within a month, Karen's lawsuit was dropped. Our counterclaim proceeded, and the HOA, what was left of it, voted to ban any future lawsuits without full member approval. But here's the best part, because Karen had filed the lawsuit under false pretenses. While acting as president, she was personally liable, meaning that HOA wasn't on the hook. A civil judgment was issued against her, $82,000. Last I heard, she had to sell her new condo 2 states over just to pay it off. Poetic, ain't it? Today, the gate still stands at the entrance to my ranch. The cows still graze lazily under the Texas sun. The HOA still technically exists, but now it's a much quieter, much humbler thing. No more random violations, no more power trips, just neighbors being neighbors. And every so often, when the breeze is just right and the prairie grass shivers like a whisper, I swear I can still hear Karen's shriek of frustration echoing through the hills. Music to my ears. If there's one thing this whole saga taught me, it's that some fences aren't built to keep people out. They were built to reveal who people really are. Karen's fence wasn't about safety. It wasn't about community standards. It was about control, pure and simple. And when control slipped through her fingers, she did what any paper queen would do. She scorched the earth on her way out. But here's the thing about scorched earth, it looks real scary for a while, sure. But after the fire, that's when the grass grows back greener than ever. Stand your ground literally and figuratively. If you're right, if the law's on your side, don't let anyone bully you off your own land. Document everything. Emails, letters, photos. You never know what little detail will save your hide later. Fight smart, not just hard. Sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling or throwing punches. It's winning quietly in court while your enemies self-destruct. Know your neighbors. When the chips are down, it's the people you share a fence line with who will either stand beside you or try to sell you out. And most of all, never underestimate a Karen on a mission. You can outlast her. You can outthink her. But you better believe she's going to go down swinging. These days, every time I swing open that gate, my gate, I tip my hat to the wide open skies and thank the good Lord for 2 things, property rights and a good sense of humor. Because if you can't laugh at life's little HOA nightmares, you're gonna spend a lot of years mad, and that's no way to live. Now, I want to hear from you. Ever had a run-in with an out-of-control HOA? Maybe a neighbor who thought they ran the whole block, or a crazy story where the little guy came out on top. Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and trust me, these tales are too good not to share. Smash that like button. If you enjoyed hearing about Karen's downfall, subscribe if you want more real-life stories where the good guys win in. Leave a comment telling me your wildest neighborhood war story, because who knows? Your tale might just be the next one we tell.